everyone.
Hi guys.
We watched because we didn't actually watch it on this DVD. We watched it like an HD copy, but I just happened to have a copy of The Shining with me at all times, just in case.
Okay.
I mean, I gotta say, you can't get good help anymore. Like, look at that angle here. The bloody picture is not straight.
To be fair,
Feel free to adjust it.
I'm not getting up and adjusting it now.
To be fair, no one in the shot is. It's fine.
Ooh!
Technically true.
Okay,
Yeah.
so basically this was recorded at some point in the past because this is a buffer episode, not a regular episode, so hello from the far past. I deeply apologize for how the world is terrible, more terrible whenever you see this.
The fact is, if they're seeing this, that means there's still an internet, which is a good sign.
That depends.
It's better than the worst case scenario.
I don't know, you could make the argument that having the internet and nothing else is the worst case scenario.
I would disagree. Having nothing
Depends
and
what's
no
on-
internet.
Depends what's on the internet.
So The Shining.
Yes.
No. The Shining.
So
Well,
this is a random one for us to watch, but a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or so, this one revealed the shocking fact that, although she was familiar with The Shining because of various pop culture things and because of, it being really famous and a lot of clips and memes and things like that, but she'd never actually seen the film. And I was like, that's an excuse to watch The Shining. I haven't seen it since I saw it in a double bill with Dr. Sleep when it came out in the cinema. Let's watch that.
No complaints from me either.
I think the last version I watched of The Shining actually was the TV version, which I watched a couple of years ago, which is still terrible.
So, yeah, I watched The Shining. And I came to the conclusion after watching the whole film in one sitting that I have seen this film before in fragmented parts throughout pop culture.
Well, of course, you watch TikTok. You've probably seen the bloody film through it, and people upload these little clips and do the entire bloody thing.
No, there was nothing really in the film that I hadn't already been aware of, if that makes sense, but it was nice to see it in its complete form.
And its full context.
Yeah.
Not really as full context. The book is required for the full context.
Yeah, I will say there's one thing though. I was watching this classic film, looking at the different editing styles and the music design from the early 80s, and I also managed to get a running commentary.
Well, I'm very excitable about film history. I don't often get to show you a classic film that I actually do know a lot about because, I'm part of the really dumbass, community of people who are way too into The Shining.
Yeah, it'll be like, oh, pause, look at this part here, you'll see here that the chairs are removed in the shot to add to a growing sense of unease. You notice the doors flipped here.
Yeah, but this was the original fan theory about The Shining, that the Overlook does not geographically make sense, that things move, that the rooms don't line up, and then it was confirmed by the producer that this was done deliberately to create unease in the audience because Kubrick was not trying to do a horror movie in the traditional way, and I think that is fascinating because he's an absolutely fascinating filmmaker, and seeing him doing horror is interesting. I mentioned because Teddy mentioned the scene with the lady who became elderly, that it looked like a Wes Anderson shot, and I was like, geez, I'd love to see a horror movie directed by Wes Anderson. That would be fascinatingly, probably terrible, but it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have a lot of the horror tropes that make modern horror films shit.
Yeah.
I get modern Hollywood horror films.
That is true.
Different parts of the world have different styles, and it's the American style that's...
The Koreans do really good.
Yeah.
And you point out at the very start of this that The Shining felt like an Asian horror movie, and I could totally see it at that point. It's much more like a Hideo Nakata film than, say, Wes Craven film.
Build to one massive payoff. Now, granted, that payoff went on for a while, but it was all build. And particularly, you tell that with the music, the way that there were so many scenes where there was no music at all, and then other scenes where they're just really pushing that music to build the tension.
Oh, the one that sounds like with the clacking and all.
Yeah.
That's by Penderecki, I think. Whenever you hear a really unpleasant, loud bit of music in The Shining, it's this two Eastern European composers that the music has been lifted from, and both of them do a lot of music that sounds like that. But the original music, like the bit at the opening, that's Wendy Carlos, who did the score to Tron and Clockwork Orange.
This was the kind of commentary we got while we were watching the film. I missed like several lines of dialogue because of these commentaries. I'm not gonna complain.
You're like, yeah, I knew quite a bit.
And the mention of the red car.
Yeah, I thought that was at the start, but no, it was partway through was Halloran saw the red car. Because in the book, The Shining, the Torrances go to the place in a red car. And Kubrick changed it to a yellow car, and then Halloran passes a crashed red car on the road. And I don't know if this is confirmed or if this is just the assumption, but that's the original, the Torrances from the book, not getting to the Overlook symbolically, because they're very different characters in the book. Because in the book, Jack is a sympathetic character. He's an alcoholic trying to be better, and he basically gets corrupted over a long period of time into getting possessed by the hotel, and then he dies heroically saving his family. And Wendy was a very strong character who basically gave as good as she got, and stuff like that. Well, in this one, Jack is clearly a deranged fuckwit from the start, and Wendy is completely, she's beaten down and destroyed. And the reason for this, at least I don't know if this is confirmed or if this is just theory, but Stephen King's author avatar was Jack Torrance. That was him dealing with his alcoholism and his guilt over doing bad things when he was drinking alcohol, stuff like that. But Kubrick's dad was apparently a violent alcoholic. So the book is alcoholism as a tragedy from the point of view of the alcoholic, and the film is alcoholism seen from the victim of an alcoholic.
That's a good way to describe it.
And which really explains why Stephen King fucking hates the film. Because Kubrick took his Avatar thing and villainized it. Which I understand, but I think both approaches are fair.
Yeah, it definitely came across with the characters that sense Wendy and Jack. More so Wendy, even at the very, very beginning, it looked like she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown the entire film. Mm-hmm. And later on, Jack was the same, just those constant little bits of you think the tiniest little thing, and they could just go over the edge and start killing people with axes. And one of them proved it, the other used a baseball bat, but still, I would also like to highlight now, granted, the way you could film this and the arguments made by the police report. She's the only one who did damage to him.
Yeah, but he's got his fingerprints on the axe and stuff, so it's going to be pretty believable that it was self-defense.
He also froze death with the axe in his hand.
Yeah. So.
Say that.
And it is revealed in Doctor Sleep that she did not, in fact, go to jail for anything, which is good.
There is something I noted at the very start as well. Spoilers, by the way, in case you, like me, haven't seen this, 40-year-old film at this point?
45 now.
Wow. At the very start, whenever she's talking to the doctor and describing how Danny got hurt, the very nervous smile and, for some reason, just the elongated ash on the cigarette, when she's describing the incident, just put you in the mindset that this was a battered woman who was trying to justify the actions of her abusive partner, where it gave the implication to me that she already was a battered woman, but this was the first instance where he hurt the Wayne.
Which is probably what Kubrick was going for. There's the famous story about Shelley Duvall basically getting abused on set, which did happen, but that kind of colors people's view of Kubrick as a director, because he did that. As I understand it, the idea was to try and get that kind of performance out of her, and she sort of said it did help, even though it did really affect her mentally. But like when he wanted other kind of performances out of people, he would do completely different things. Like the kid who played Danny didn't even realize he was in a horror movie till years later, apparently.
Well, that was one particularly dense kid.
Well, again, he was a kid.
Red rum, red rum, red rum.
To be fair, the main thing he probably remembered was people playing with him on set between shots.
Oh yes, play with us, Danny. And then they of course do.
And then you've got like Jack Nicholson. Apparently, he would do a lot of takes. Jack Nicholson just to get, because he would start off doing normal type takes, and he wanted to get more and more energy out of him, and so he gets more over the top, and so then he would use those takes. But he had a thing of not telling what he wanted. He would just cast people, figuring that they would get to where he wanted eventually, and so he would then use the takes where they got to the right emotional space. Like with Scatman Crothers, who played Dick Halloran, he also had a minor breakdown during one scene. I think it was something like 120 takes in one scene, where he broke down crying, just begging, "What do you want from me?" I think that was the scene where he was talking with Danny and with the ice cream. But if you look at the scene that they used, he is utterly crushed and defeated. He's really happy and gregarious with everyone else, but it was him and Danny. He is serious, and he is crushed and defeated, as though he is scared for this kid, but he's trying not to show it, which shows that there is method to Kubrick's, his approach. Yeah.
Speaking of the Scatman,
I was about to do that, yeah.
I assume the character was more fleshed out in the book.
Yes.
Because I've mentioned it in previous Backseat Critiques. Freaking rule of filmmaking. If you can take a character out without impacting, almost 99% of what he does could just be cut out. Like the whole thing is like, oh, he's Miami, he's trying to call and trying to help and coordinating this whole trip back, walks into the, hello, oh fuck, I'm dead.
In the book, he doesn't die.
Well, he's fucking dying this.
I know.
And right away.
He survived the book, and they... Yeah, he is well fleshed out, more fleshed out in the book. He also turned up in It.
Never watched it.
Again, never watched it.
Because It has flashbacks.
This is the only Stephen King adaptation I've watched as a film.
Really?
You haven't seen Carrie?
You haven't seen The Mist?
I haven't seen Carrie, I haven't seen The Mist.
You've never seen The Mist?
I have.
We're watching The
I've
Mist!
seen Misery.
You watched The Mist with me.
What was the... Well, actually, don't spoil it, because this...
It is Mist! Thomas Jane is the star, and there's Mist!
I did, and books-wise, I haven't read any Stephen King other
I can think of a Stephen King novel, a Stephen King adaptation you saw.
What?
The Running Man.
Okay.
Now, to be fair, the Running Man film has almost nothing to do with the Richard Bachman, aka Stephen King book of the same name. They changed a fuckload, but still it's an adaptation.
1960-something is the only book of his that I've actually read.
Oh, the only one I've read fully is the Tommy
one.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Have you seen the TV version of that?
I have not.
Do you want to borrow it? It is good.
I can just download it myself if I want it. Wait, no, I didn't say that. I could find a perfectly legal access source.
It's probably on Netflix.
The internet, like Netflix, yes, to 100%.
You raising that black flag there, Jared?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Did you see The Lawnmower Man? It was technically based on one of his
If
short
I
stories.
did, I have no recollection of it.
That's good. It's terrible.
Hey, we're getting a little off topic here.
Most Stephen King films are fucking terrible. Most are like the only people who do good ones consistently are God damn it, I've forgotten his name. Frank Darabont, who did The Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, and The Mist, and Mike Flanagan, who did Gerald's Game, has got the upcoming Life of Chuck. He did Doctor Sleep. And he's doing the upcoming Amazon TV version of Carrie.
Fair enough. But back to the original point, I was talking about the film that we watched. As I was watching this, it made me realise just how much filmmaking and the expectations of scene transitions has greatly changed. Like at the start of the film, it was all the fade between the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just the done thing back then. But the further into the film you get, there's more hard, jarring cuts. If you've noticed.
Yeah.
Like at the start of the film, it's all good and kind. It fades softly between the scenes, and then there's just more.
Because it's getting to a a crescendo.
Mm-hmm.
Kittens playing with a toy onto the camera.
It's more interesting than us.
But yeah, I mean, adaptation-wise, I think the film would have had more oomph if we weren't dealing with Jack Nicholson and Jack being a obvious psychopath from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Like again, I think I mentioned this separate to this. I would have loved to have seen an adaptation with a character, a guy who we all think of as very amiable and lovely, like the guy from Early Edition. He would have been absolutely brilliant to then have him do the break.
Chandler. The Kyle Chandler.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see a new other thing. I'm kind of sad that Flanagan did Doctor Sleep over doing a new version of The Shining. That would have been fascinating. He would have got Henry Thomas to play the part, because Henry Thomas is one of his regular stable of actors who plays Jack Torrance in flashbacks to The Shining. But Henry Thomas played Elliot in E.T.
Okay.
Yeah, he's an adult actor now. I mean, like, got a decent career. Turns up in a lot of things. Though I gotta say, he was miscast as Jack in Doctor Sleep. They should have got Christian Slater. He's basically Jack Nicholson but younger and with less charisma. Although I disagree with the fact that he's obviously a lunatic, is that is a detriment. I mean, people at the time thought it was. That reviews for Against the Shining, it got a Razzie. It either got nominated or it won Razzies in it when it was first released. So it was reviewed terribly. But I very much disagree, because you're wanting to see like the emotional journey of going from normal to end.
Yeah.
What Kubrick did was much more of the Hitchcockian. What's the difference between horror and terror? Or horror and fright. In the Hitchcock's thing was, if you have a loud bang, loud noise, that is just fright, that is terror, that is just like a moment of fear. However, if you show a bomb at the start of a scene and you show a timer on it and you have the scene, that's horror, because you know that something bad's going to happen. And by having Jack Nicholson playing Torrance as a complete, obvious lunatic from the start, you know that that's going to happen from the first frame, and you're just waiting for it to happen, which builds the tension.
But how much of that is the casting of the actor, and how much of that is the zeitgeist? Like, the main thing people know about this is that he does go crazy. So it would be very hard for someone to watch this film blindly without having been subjected to parodies.
But at the time, that wasn't the case.
True.
So, like,
the modern day viewing.
Well, the film itself really can't be blamed for how it's viewed modernly, because it's become a bit of pop culture. But at the time, Jack Nicholson was sort of an up and coming actor with who would lean into that kind of performance already. So they already knew what they were getting in for. So it's just the approach that Kubrick took is just a different one than either of you would have gone for. It's a more atypical one.
Yeah, there's another scene in there that I'm convinced proves that Jack was abusive, because he takes one of the largest, most central rooms in the hotel to be his writing room. It is loud echoes that enforces his presence, and he basically bans them from entering it. So he is forcing himself in a public area, so if they step in there, it gives him an excuse to blow up at them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was an intentional setup in that, but that's the way I viewed that.
Pretty sure it was.
Plus, it was a really nice view room in terms of shot composition.
True.
But I think it was deliberate. I mean, Torrance in the book is not. He's not inveterate abuser. Torrance in the film definitely is.
Overall,
for the one person in the audience who hasn't watched the film.
Yeah. It was an alright film. The length of it was a bit excessive.
That's because it's an older film.
It is an older film.
Oh, that reminds me. What was cut from the European cut? It's half an hour shorter. What sort of stuff's
There's
missing?
lots of little bits, like the bit with the skeletons, the bit with Halloran looking at the car. Those are just bits, a lot of bits like that were cut. I prefer the extended cut. I'm glad we watched the extended cut, but yeah, it's just torture. But it's unless you're a freak, it would be hard for most people to watch both, far apart and then try to articulate exactly all the changes. It's not like there's massive big things like, say, with Aliens, where you've got the even better example, the X-Men Days of Future Past, which adds a whole subplot in its director's cut. It's nothing like that. It's just bits here and there.
Trimming scenes, cutting out flashes, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably cut down a bit in the maze.
Yeah.
But yeah, just for the novelty of it, I would watch it so that you can understand a lot of the references. But as it was pointed out by Teddy, there's a lot of things in there that you wouldn't understand if you hadn't read the book or if you didn't have an encyclopedia next to you.
Yeah, like the most obvious thing of this. Well, you got the ghosts who you have no context for. Like, why is someone in a big furry costume, filleting someone? Why is this guy, wandering around saying,
Do you
"Great
really
Potter"?
need to ask? I mean, they're clearly having fun.
It is. I think it was great that they were just reduced to striking horror images, which is really, really good. But yeah, in the book, all of those ghosts get full backstory.
Like the woman in the bathtub.
Yeah. She's elderly socialite who killed herself. If I remember rightly, it's been many years since I read The Shining. And it's been...
And she's inspiring directors.
Yes. And...
I still think they deliberately set up that shot to make her look abnormally tall.
It's possible. I don't know how tall Jack Nicholson is. She was. I reckon she was at least 6'1".
Because whenever she was stepping out of the bath, she was just framed perfectly. And then when she stepped out of the actual bathtub itself and stepped forward, she looked like she was dominating the room, which I think was intentionally portrayed to make her... I would say draw the eye, but the fact that she has her tits out probably does that better than anything. It imposes her on the scene.
She looked statuesque.
Yes, that's the better one.
She looked like an ancient Greek statue come to life. The perfect proportions that you would see in an ancient Greek statue. Yeah, that kind of thing. Or I wasn't thinking Venus so much because Venus tends to be a bit more voluptuous. Athena. You don't see Athena naked in statues, I don't think, ever, but she looked like you put some clothing on her, she'd be a perfect Athena.
So, do you have any comments?
No. Enjoyable film. It's nice to watch an older horror film before America decided that horror meant jump scares and nothing but jump scares.
I'm still really disappointed with the new... Well, I say the new, it was a few years back now, the Friday the 13th remake / sequel, where it was like the actor, it was like set in the real world. You remember?
Friday the 13th?
Yeah, no, sorry, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, Nightmare on Elm Street 7.
As I was watching that, I could count down the jump scares. Literally, it was like jump scare in 3, 2, 1. And I was right every time.
Jump scares, they're the Comic Sans of horror filmmaking. They're not intrinsically bad themselves, they're just terribly used by a lot of people because they're easy to use. Like Comic Sans. People who don't know anything about visual art or aesthetics, they'll put Comic Sans there because it looks nice and friendly.
They're cheap.
And jump scares, similar sort of deal. People who don't know how to make good horror tend to put them in there. If you want a good example of jump scare, go all the way back to 1940s Cat People. The original version, although arguably the original version is silent, but the famous version back then was from Cat People, and it was so famous at the time that it was not called a jump scare at that point. It was called a Luton bus because it involved a bus, and it was produced or directed by a guy called Val Luton. But Flanagan, who did Doctor Sleep, he doesn't use jump scares very often in his stuff. He just uses it in its proper logical place. But apparently at one point he got so annoyed with people pointing out that he never uses jump scares, and so for a joke he decided to put as many jump scares as he could into one thing. So one episode of his show, The Midnight Club, which is basically a modern version of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which is a great concept, but he managed to put something like one jump scare per minute into this thing.
So we've done the usual thing where we've gone off topic entirely and talked about different things. So to summarise, if you haven't already consumed this thing via pop culture and the zeitgeist, I would recommend it. Go ahead.
And if you have, check out Room 237, the documentary about all the mad theories people have about this, including the one about the moon landing, the one about claims it's to do with Nazi Germany. You've got the makeup of the hotel, which is confirmed, so that's a bit dull. You've got the theory that this is about the Native American genocide, which is one of the more supported mad ones, I feel. You got this theory that these aren't all on that documentary, but they're on the internet, various places. You've got the theory that it's about the gold standard, which is on the less likely part of deranged, I feel. You got the people who are convinced that it's about sexual abuse. You got a whole lot of theories. It's a film it's like a Matryoshka doll of mad ideas because it is so deliberately not constructed in a normal way. Like the hotel is a maze, and so, but a lot of other things, the details don't line up. Like the detail of the Biosundani, that Jack hurting him. In one scene, it's like 5 months ago. Then a month later, it's 3 years ago, right, from a different character. Now, was that two bits of...
She did say it happened when he was in kindergarten.
He also said it happened 5 months ago, and he hasn't drunk since that was 5 months ago.
That's fair.
So, in the script, the timeline of the film does not make sense. And my take is that this is Kubrick once again making a maze out of the film, because he was trying to do horror in an unusual way, just to create an unease that the film, it just does not make sense, which gives rise to all these fascinating and some completely deranged theories, which makes it great fun to dive into. I spent half of the film trying to work out a headcanon fodder I could do about it, because this would be a great subject for a headcanon fodder video, but I couldn't think of anything that's not already been done. There are so many theories about this.
She's diving this far into The Shining. I wonder what she'd look into the birds.
Anyway, shall we wrap up?
Yeah, we'll wrap up. From a modern standpoint, the filmmaking choices are very noticeably aged. As Zara did point out at one point, the Steadicam was invented for this film, and you can kind of tell as they're zooming around through the hallways.
Yeah, there were things similar to the Steadicam before that, but they were very, very difficult to use unwieldy and usually just created ad hoc for film, but this one literally invented the Steadicam. The Steadicam was so new that a few years after this, the same studio, I believe, they repurposed some Steadicam rigs to use to hold the smart guns in Aliens. Because they looked so futuristic.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, now that I think back at the big...
Yeah, that's a Steadicam rig, literally.
I'll never be able to unsee that now, thank you. So, yeah, so that's our opinion. That's Zara going into a big rant on it, and if you ever want to get her started, just talk to her about it. But other than that, I don't have much else to say, other than it's definitely showing its age. The story does kind of hold up. I liked the way that they didn't do the old horror movie tropes because it wasn't a horror director. The build-up was quite...
The only horror movie trope that they really did was the scene with the skeletons, because everything's suddenly dark. Because everything else was really deliberately brightly lit. All the horror was happening out in the open, but then one scene it's dark. There's cobwebs and there's skeletons. I wouldn't be surprised if part of why that was out of the European releases because Kubrick thought it was a bit crap. Like, he did make changes very late in the film. Like, the film went to cinemas, and they had a whole epilogue about Mr. Ullman, the guy in charge of the Overlook, coming to visit them in the hospital, and he, you know, the ball that Danny was playing with that he rolled away and the girls got. Ullman comes in and basically gives the ball to Danny, saying they found it in the Overlook and they think it's his. And the idea was to suggest that Ullman was actually somehow connected to the ghosts of the Overlook. But Kubrick, after the original screenings in the cinema, he cut it out because he decided that it was a shit idea. And so and he destroyed the footage. So all that exists of that scene is some still images.
Fair. So yeah, we'll finish that off there.
Yeah, well, do the norm.
Okay, I'm feeling alright, fine. So, usual shenanigans. If you enjoy what we do, be it the reviews, the shorts, or us basically talking shit about films, give us a wee like, subscribe, comment. Any interaction you make with the video does prompt it up on the recommended for other people, so please do, even if it's just to criticise us lifting the can. Check out our Patreon for early and exclusive content, and be sure to hop into the Discord where you can heckle this one. And I'm trying to convince the other ones to do this kind of thing maybe for TV things, like a mini-series or something like that. If you have any suggestions for a show you'd like us to maybe look at episode by episode in future, you know, make a suggestion. Can't promise, but, you know.
And tune in soon where we're going to also review Doctor Sleep. I'm going to make sure, if when we put this up, the Doctor Sleep one is the next one.
Oh, nice one.
See that? Organisation. Bye, guys.